We'll start with a quick overview of what you'll see when you bring the screen up. You see here in the upper left-hand corner, this is your destination or your next waypoint you've selected. This is the distance to that waypoint, and this is your ground speed. And once you're moving, right below that, you'll see your estimated time and route. Next to that, you've got your magnetic heading in yellow. This is what you should be heading, and this is what you're actually tracking right now. So you can also look down on the screen here and see your magnetic heading is 063 and your track. So it's always as easy as flying the plane to the triangle. So in this case, of course, we would just turn right. Over here on your right hand side, you'll get your current altitude in GPS. Directly below that, you'll see that you've got a live GPS lock right now with 10 satellites, and you have a live XM weather lock. Now, of course, if you don't have XM weather, this square right here will just be blank. Okay, below that, you've got your range indicator, and right here on your range indicator, if you tap on the left-hand side, you bring the range in closer. You tap on the right-hand side, you bring the range out further. And below that is your menu. First thing you see here is the nav key. This nav key it's primarily for settings that once you set, you're probably not going to change very often. So you actually would not be using this key that much in flight in general. And of course, to get rid of any menu, you just tap on the white part up here and it'll get rid of it. Next one is your info. Of course, this would be pretty self-explanatory here. This will pull up all the airports with your comm frequencies, any remarks, a live map of that airport, and any live weather around it at the time. You'll get your METARs if it's reporting METARs. This airport does not report METARs. And you'll get, of course, your approach plates and your arrivals as well. Once again, we just tap at the top here where it's white to come back to the main screen. Message key is really not used for anything except if you have traffic, live traffic. And right now we're not hooked into live traffic, so you would not see that. The next key is your weather key. Now, you would normally just go in here if you want to customize the settings that you see on the screen as far as different combinations of weather. Or if you're not getting live XM lock, you can go into diagnostics and it'll tell you exactly what is going on. But in general, you really don't have to go into this menu. To display weather, all you would really do is you just hit the enter button. And right here it's telling you this next rad 5 minutes old. We don't have anything currently in the area here. You can see it's quite far out over here before you see any weather. Let's bring it back in here. This arrow right here with the up arrow and map, what this does, it allows you to display different layers of navigational information. Now you can customize this too, so you have only the layers that you want to see. But there's quite a bit of navigational information, so you don't want to have it on the screen all at the same time. So you can see each time you hit it, you've got different combinations we have set up here. Now the last thing probably should show as well is we're looking at this black background, but you do have a number of different options here. You can go in here and you can display terrain on here. You can also go back in and you can change that to not just the map as a background, but terrain alert or a combination of the both. And of course, with this up, you can still just hit the map button and display different layers of navigational information over it. Change your range and display different layers of weather information too. So you can see right here it's getting pretty cluttered because it's just too much information. So that's why you hit the map again, and this layer here is only displaying right now actually the winds at the airport. We'll go into a lot more detail later about the XM weather. The satellite status indicators will be in one of three colors. Just think of it just like a stoplight. Green is go. So if you have a green signal, that means your signal is good. In this case, we've got a yellow GPS, and this tick mark is going back and forth. What that means is the GPS antenna is working perfectly fine, but you're not getting enough satellites to give a position. Same would be true of the XM. If it was yellow, it would mean the receiver is working, but you're not getting a good enough satellite signal for reception. The other color that you would see would be red. And red's going to show up to indicate you've got a disconnect of the GPS entirely. What this means is it's treating it like a hardware failure. For instance, if you did not plug in the GPS or did not plug in the XM, you will get red. If you are getting an XM signal but still not getting XM weather, what you would do is you would go into XM diagnostics, and it would tell you in plain English exactly what's going on. Of course, in this case, it's working, but if it was not, it would tell you whether it's disconnected, whether your service was accidentally deactivated, or what the case may be. For the rest of this video, I'll have the GPS turned off, and I'll put the software in simulation mode. To do that, just press the nav key, put on the system, select settings, GPS mode, and demo. Okay, so now it's simulating flight, in this case to Colorado Springs. Our magnetic heading should be 159. We're almost the exact opposite now, our track. And you can see we're turning slowly over to the right to match up here. And that makes sense because you see the airplane on the left-hand side and it has to go to the right to match up with the triangle. So once we do that, why don't we also simulate descending. Okay, in this case, you can see that we've triggered not only the tower alerts, but we're just on the edge of triggering the terrain alert. And that means whenever we're within 8 minutes and 500 feet of either terrain or towers, we will trigger it. So in this case, let's just pull up a different map here. Maybe one with the airspace. Another thing you can do, tap on any airspace here, and it'll automatically give you the altitudes of that particular airspace. Want to go to a particular airport, tap on the airport, and select direct to. You can also select another airport by hitting direct to, by typing in the identifier. So we select airport here, tap in the gray area, put the first letter in of a particular airport, and it comes up with the closest airport for that. And let's just say, in this case, that's the airport we want. So we just want to hit enter. Now the next thing it does is ask us if we want to select an approach for a particular runway. In this case, we're just going to be flying VFR, so we wouldn't need that. That's how you select an airport. The exact same would hold true if you were selecting an identifier, a VOR, or an NDB. The main things to remember while you're flying is this controls your range, in and out. This displays different layers of navigational information on the screen that you can customize. And if you press the nav key and go into terrain, you can either display terrain alert. Right here it's all color coded in relation to your current altitude. Red, of course, being at your altitude. You can go right back in here and you can turn both the background map and that a terrain alert on, or just the map itself. And of course, during all this, just by hitting the up arrow, you still can overlay any kind of navigational information on top of it, as well as weather. In this case, we don't really have any weather to show in this particular area, but by hitting the enter button, every time you hit the enter button, you'll display different layers of weather information. So that's what you end up using most of the time, those main things. Now, of course, the other thing you can do is, let's say you want to look at the sectional charts. We'd hit the nav key, just tap where it says maps. In this case, you have the chart that around the Class B airspace, your standard sectional chart, your low en route, and your high en route. Let's just say we want to see the sectional chart. Just hit enter, and here you are on the sectional chart. You can also, by touching down here, change the range however you want, as far as the zoom, I mean. By hitting the enter button, you can center the aircraft. You can move, just grab the chart with your finger and move it around however you want. And very often when you do that, you just need to double tap the enter button again to center the aircraft. To get rid of this chart, just click on the X in the upper left hand corner here, and right back here. Same would be true of all your IFR charts in here as well. Let's just say using that one. And once you set a magnification level, it keeps that magnification level unless you change it again. Let's say we're flying along, maybe it's in IFR conditions, maybe it's at night, and you have an engine problem and you need to make an emergency landing. To do that, what you can do is, and let's say obviously you can't make it to an airport, you do have the ability to bring up satellite imagery. You just hit the nav key, select terrain, and you see Landsat here, so we want to turn that on. And it'll actually show you the fields and buildings and terrain below you to give you a much better idea of which direction to head as to what would be your safest course of action. You can also go in here and you have the ability to change its brightness and contrast if you want, and it just depends. The imagery around the country varies in its contrast, and so some places you may want to boost it. In other areas of the country you may not need to change any of that, but you have that ability to modify it. Next, I'd like to show you some of the presets as far as how you can set up the map, because everyone likes to look at it a little bit differently. Just hit nav. Let's go into map settings. Here you can keep the screen the way it is, where the compass is at the top and you're viewing everything in track up. You just tap on the right hand side, you can view everything in north up. You can also center the aircraft on the screen if you want, or you can have the compass down lower like this. Of course, you also have the option, you don't even need to have the compass on at all for that matter. And the other thing is the size right here. This is the size of the information on the screen. Right now, the letters at the top are relatively big, but let's just say you want to have more viewable map area. Go in here and hit full, and you would still get all the information. It's just that it's going to be smaller and you'll just have a larger map. So it's just preferable to set it up the way you like before you go flying. Next thing in here is the flight path. There's three different ways. There's a course line, there's also a track line, and you can turn the flight path off. What that means is when you're flying from point A to point B, maybe you just want to have a track line. Think of a track line as snapping a chalk line from where you started to where you ended up. so it'll show you where you're deviating along the way. See, I'd move the aircraft around, and that's really where the aircraft started. So that would give you the indication right there. If you put course line, what that means is no matter how much you vary along your path, it's still going to update and show you the shortest distance to your destination point. The other thing here is runway extenders, and what that does is you can either get an extension for the runway. In this case, this airport has runway 29 and 11, and these are extension lines that come way out from the end of the runway here. You may also want to see it in terms of 45-degree entry paths. You would just go back in here, and what you would do is you would set this up in advance. It's just as far as your personal preference, and just leave it alone after that. So right here, if you're going to go land on runway 11, which is this direction right here into the runway, you would pick up on this 45-degree entry pattern right here, and then it'd bring you for your downwind and your base. Now when you select this as a default for airports, it's only going to show it on your destination airport. If it showed it on every airport, it'd be very confusing to see all that. We go right back in here again. You also have the option where you can display the compass. The to and the from indicator from the compass will constantly update on the screen here if you turn that on. So that's just another option. Down here is the range ring. Some people like to have these. And basically, it just puts a ring around your aircraft. So maybe you like to have a 10-mile ring all the time, which might indicate, for instance, that that's 5 minutes ahead of where you're going to be. And then the final thing is auto zoom. You can select auto zoom if you want, and that'll always be based on your next waypoint. Of course, the minute you go up here in the range indicator and change it again, it overrides the auto zoom feature. We have a couple more settings as well. Just press the nav key, go into display settings, and the first one is the icon of your plane. You can change it to a couple different variations, including a helicopter. Here is the highway color. Maybe you want it red, white, or an off gray. The next thing here is filters. And what this is here, for instance, it's set so you'll see all the airports out to 500 miles ahead of you. You'll see all the private airports within 5 miles of you. You can, of course, change these numbers all you want. Just remember, if you increase the number for the private airports by much, it's going to bring up a lot of airports on the screen. It'll kind of clutter it. And don't forget, even if any of this information is not in the filter range, whether it's airports or VORs, if you actually select it as to where you're going, it doesn't matter how far away it is, it'll still show up. So this is just for all the extra airports around you. Minimum runway length, obviously. No sense in seeing airports you can't land at. Now if we go right back in here again, you would do the same thing here for nav aids. And generally we just set all these at the highest number. But 500 of the distance means that between your aircraft, the next 500 miles, you will see all VORs. What zoom means is there's a certain cutoff point that if you go past that, if you, let's say you change your zoom to like 250 miles or something, it's going to reduce all those VORs so you won't see them. Because at certain zoom ranges, and you can play around with it a little bit, but at certain zoom ranges, to see all the VORs and intersections within 500 miles is a lot. It's really too much. Generally, these are set up as defaults, and most people like them the way they are, but if you want to fiddle around with them, you certainly can. These are all customized layers of navigational information. Maybe some of these you don't want, or you want them modified slightly. That's where you would hit Nav, Display Settings, and go in here for layers. And the page we're on here is has airports, class airspace, special use. You could also add NDBs, intersections, fixes, VORs, airways, jetways, arrivals, departures, parachute jumping areas, obstacles. Now, when I say obstacles, what that does is it'll display the obstacles in either green, yellow, or red, depending on how high you are above them. Regardless, even if you don't have obstacles set, if you're in conflict with an obstacle within 8 minutes and 500 feet, it's going to pop up in red on the screen anyways. The next thing to be displayed is TFRs, but remember, you only get TFRs if you have XM weather. Highways, hydrographics, which really means lakes, and state borders. And you can also highlight a path that'll trace out a path of where you flew. Now, what you can do is when you're on a particular page, if you don't like that page, just hit delete page. If you want to create a new page, let's say I want to add an additional page, and this page is only going to have, let's say, jetways. Okay, and then all I do here is I insert that page. And I confirm that. Okay, so now when I hit the up arrow, I have all these different layers of information. And I've got this additional layer I just added now, the jetways. Let's say you want some information while you're flying of a particular airport. First thing to remember, just to review a bit, if you just touch on the screen with this airspace, it's going to give you frequency information for the airport as well as the altitudes of the airspace. Whenever this pops up here, just tap on the white part at the top here and it'll go away. Another thing it'll do is wherever you tap on the screen, it's going to tell you the elevation and how far that is and the heading relative to where you are now. Okay, let's just close that out here. Now let's just say we want to pull up some information about this airport here, which is Greeley. Just highlighted it, I hit the info key, and this is Greeley. So it'll give you your facility, your frequency information, the remarks, the map, as well as weather. This airport has a METAR, and this tells you the current time, and this tells you when this was reported. So 45 minutes ago, we got this information. Click on the plates. It'll give you all your airport diagrams, your departures, arrivals, all of that. And of course, it tells you the date it's effective down here. Just another thing to remember, if you highlight a approach plate here, over on the right-hand side, you'll also be able to see the date that it expires to if you want to verify it more than one source. Another thing here is, of course, you can magnify these charts however you want and move them around. Now just tap up here, the X is, to bring you back to this page. Let's say we like everything that we see here and decide we're going to go to this airport instead. Just hit direct to. It'll take you directly there. Another way to pull up information, just hit the info key, and here select airports, tap in this box here, tap in the gray area, and put in the first letter of the identifier. And most of the time that'll be the airport you're going to, but let's just say you added a second letter here, and that's the one you really want to go to. Okay, now next thing we do, just tap over here in the blue area and it locks that identifier in. And once again, you have the same sort of information here that you would get. They've got METARs. They also have a TAF here as well. Once again, just tap at the white part at the top here to get back to the main screen. Of course, the alternate to tapping on the top of any white part of a menu to close it out is you can just hit the main key down here as well. Do the same thing. If you're flying direct to an airport, you do not need to create a flight plan. You just go in here and select direct to and select the particular airport you want to go to. But let's say you do want to create a flight plan where there are multiple legs. To do that, press the nav key, go down here to flight plan, and we want to create a flight plan. What you want to do is tap in that gray box and just give it some sort of a name. Now what you would need to do is add any combination of airports, VORs, NDBs or intersections, or any of your custom waypoints as well. Just go in here and just type in the first letter. Most of the time that's going to be the airport you're going to anyways. Just hit enter. Want to create a second one here. You can just select top of the list here if you wish. And let's select this one here. We need to put 2 of the letters in. And final one. Okay, so we've created a flight plan and it has these 4 waypoints here. Of course, you don't even have to put in the airport you're departing from, because when you turn the unit on, it's going to start from there anyways. So in this case, let's just take the navigate information off the screen, and you can see here we start over here, go to this first point, second, and that's our whole entire flight plan here. Normally if you created it at home and then you wanted to select it at the airport, you would go into direct to here and it says select flight plan. You can pull it up there. This is also where you would go to check all the flight plans you've created. You could literally put in thousands of flight plans if you wanted to. So the next step here, let's actually start plane over here. Okay, so we're flying. Let's pull up the airport information as well. So that's our first segment, and of course it's going to give you all the information, the distance, your ground speed, and when you're on the heading towards the airport, it'll give you estimated time and route. Let's say though you're flying along and you need to modify the flight plan for whatever reason, most typically because of the weather. Let's say we want to do that. Let's say we don't want to go to this airport, we want to move over here instead to this airport. What you would do is just hit direct to, and then you want to go to modify flight plan. See, it always defaults to the next segment of the route, although you can make all these changes to the right relative to any waypoint you want. But let's just say we do want to make it relative to our next waypoint. And do we want to insert something before? No. And we don't want to add something after. We just want to replace this outright. In this case, we just select replace. And then of course it asks you what you want to replace it with. In this case it's an airport. And it's going to be HFJ. And then you hit enter. Bingo. You can see how it's moved it over here now. So that's how you'd modify a flight plan. Just remember, the next time you turn this on for your next flight, if you were to pull up this flight plan, it would default to the original flight plan you'd created, which would mean bringing you up to this airport, PTS.
Say you want to create a user waypoint. To do that, just click on Nav and User Waypoints. And we could, of course, delete them as well, but we want to select Create. And it's going to default to the current position you're at right now. If you're flying over a lake or something, just tap here and put in whatever you want to put in to identify it. You can also tap any other particular place you want over here and do the same thing and create your user waypoint for that location. And of course you can insert the waypoints as part of any flight plan that you would like.
Let's say you want to select an approach. To do that, what you would do is hit the Direct To key. We want to select an airport. Let's do an approach into Santa Fe. Let's have runway 2 and select our RNAV approach. Hit enter. It'll also ask you which initial approach fix. Let's pick this one here and enter. Now it's going to pull up the entire approach in front of you right now. And these are the feeder routes right here. Once you get onto the initial approach, you'll see the highway and the sky boxes leading you all the way down. Right now we're on a 2D view. As we get onto the next segment of our approach here, we can see that we have to be at or above 8,400 feet. We're a little bit higher at 9,000, so let's step it down a bit. Now while you're flying this approach, you can also reference your chart. All you would do is hit the info key and bring the chart right up here. In this case we've made the chart a lot larger than it really is, but you can have complete control of exactly how big or small you want the chart to be. Remember though that all the altitudes from these segments we've already displayed on the main screen. The only altitude we have not displayed is your minimum. In this case, let's just say it's going to be the 6,600 here. To get back to the main screen, tap in the upper corner where the X is, just tap twice, and it'll bring you right back here. You can also see the 3D view. So let's just pull that up now. Now you can see that the boxes are off to our left-hand side here, and we are not flying through them. If you look down your 2D view, you can see that that would make sense. We're just a little bit off to the right, so we just try to center ourselves a little bit more. You can see though it's extremely precise. These boxes are only 150 feet in width, so that means if you were flying through the center of the box, it would be enough for one aircraft on either side of you. Let's bring our 2D range out here a bit more again. Now this next waypoint here, Herma, that's what we see as a green box. Basically any of these green boxes are waypoints, and all the gray boxes are every half mile in between. You can see right here we're about 2 miles out. Segment right here. You can also see that once we cross this point up here, it's going to be quite a bit lower for our next segment, and in addition we're also going to be going to the left a little bit. Okay, at this point we're just flying through that waypoint, and now it's triggered the next segment, and you can see we can go down to 6,820 feet. So let's drop down now. Once again, you need to move over to the right a little bit here to be better lined up. Now in this case we're still about 6 miles out from the threshold of the runway. You do have another option here where you can go into the 3D settings and you can magnify your view up ahead, which is pretty interesting because lots of times if you looked out the window on a VFR day you might not be able to see the airport, especially when you're more like 8 to 10 miles away. But when you pull up this magnified view, you can see the actual threshold of the runway and exactly how you're lining up, and you can see we're looking pretty good now. We're doing exactly what we should be doing. Let's say you just wanted to check something on the chart again. Just would go back here, look at something, verify it, and you're back at the main screen here. Now in demonstration mode what we can do is we can fast forward our progress. You could hit Direct To and select Move To, and this would be our minimum. Okay, in this case you can see we're only 1 mile away from the runway and everything's looking just the way it should. I'm going to to fly through this square, and then this last one's going to be our threshold. You, of course, can go to 2D mode as well. And in 2D mode, you'll be able to see that just as we cross the threshold here, it's going to automatically trigger the missed approach. Hopefully at this point we'll be able to see the airport. You can also see the towers starting to pop up in the altitudes of those. 6,400 feet versus the 6,600 we're at. So you can see how close it really is. Now what happens is the minute you cross the threshold of the runway here, it's automatically going to trigger the missed approach, as you can see up here. So we need to climb to 9,000 feet. Of course we're down at the 6,600 now. And this will just take us right out to the holding pattern.
If you have the optional artificial horizon, the first time you plug it in, you'll want to hit the nav key, go to System, and then go to Devices. And here there's two options, Disabled eGyro and Enabled. So you'd want to enable it, and then you need to reboot the computer, and then after that it'll be permanently on and you don't have to activate it again. To turn on the gyro, just hit the nav key, go into the side menu here, and select gyro on. And you'll see a pitch, yaw, and roll right on the screen here. Go back in here and turn it off. And of course, if you wanted to have the alert function only operate, you could turn that on here. Just because the gyro is turned off, though, if you were to pull up the 3D terrain, you would still see it on the 3D terrain. You'll see a pitch and roll here while you do your approach, or even in straight and level flight. With XM Weather, of course, you can overlay live weather on top of the navigational screen. To do this, all you need to do is just press the Enter button. Every time you press the Enter button, you'll get a different layer of weather. And in this upper left-hand corner here, it'll tell you what it is. This means that it's an XRAD and it's 1 minute old. If you hit the Enter button again, you'll get CV, all your ceilings and visibilities. And to be able to read these graphics, just think of it as a stoplight. Green is go, yellow is not as good, and red is worse. So the vertical bar is your ceiling, and the horizontal bar is just the visibility down the runway. So if it's solid green, like at UNU, that means it's solid VFR weather here. Now, if you go over to EZS as an example, you've got a yellow ceiling, which means it's a marginal VFR ceiling, but VFR visibility. In addition, if you go over to ATW, you'll see that you've got red horizontal, which means IFR visibility, but you've got a magenta ceiling, and that's the worst of all four, and that means it's a low IFR ceiling. The other information we've got here is snow. We've got light snow being reported at ATW, and up a little further here we've got light rain being reported. Now, if it was either moderate rain or snow, those letters would be in yellow and there'd be a plus sign. If it was heavy, they'd be in red and there'd be 2 plus signs next to them. Other airports, you'll see NP. That means there's no precipitation. Not all airports report if they get precipitation or not. So that means they do report and they're really not getting precipitation. Now, the other thing to look at is the airport identifiers. Some of them, instead of being in magenta and blue to represent controlled and uncontrolled airports, you've got green, yellow, and actually red, which we don't see on the screen. But a green identifier means that report is a half an hour or less in age. The yellow means it's a half an hour to an hour. And if you see a red identifier, it'll be in excess of an hour, so you can ignore those. Another thing is when you pull up pages with a lot of weather information, sometimes it's useful to get the rest of the information off the page to declutter it. So we just hit the map up arrow here, and we'll just go to a blank page here. So this is only showing us the METARs. Just makes it that much easier to read. You just hit the enter button again, and these are your winds on the ground. So right here, it'll allow you to see, let's just move back here a little bit, just look at this one as an example. This means that the wind is going in the direction of this arrow right now, down the runway here. So you've got a crosswind on this runway. Although it's between 0 and 10 knots, so it's really low. Now, if it was a higher wind, those indicators would be in yellow, and if they were higher still, they'd be in red. Actually, in this area, they're all pretty low, but invariable. But that's really useful because you can see what areas the winds are all of a sudden kicking up to 25 knots or so. You'll see these little indicators start turning red with the number below it as far as what the wind speed is. Another really important thing is the temperature dew point spreads. Just hit the enter button again, DP for temperature dew point. And what this is saying is, you know, some of these airports are reporting VFR, but the fact is the temperature dew point spreads are very narrow, so don't be surprised if the weather gets worse. You know, particularly if it's the summertime and sun's starting to set, where the temperature will be dropping, that could get you into trouble. But looking at it here, you can see the big picture of what areas are marginal and which areas are not. So this is sort of a good general IFR, VFR roadmap with the weather, showing you what's going to be happening in the future. Just hit the enter button again, and this is strikes right here. Unfortunately, there's no lightning today, but you would see, I don't believe there's any lightning. No, there is not any lightning. But you would see white lightning bolts on here. And the other thing that you would see with the strikes is that it gets updated every 5 minutes. And after 20 minutes, the older data goes off the screen. So you can see how the lightning is developing over time. This next page just says tops, and what that is the echo tops. This will not pick up all cloud cover. Your infrared satellite imagery does that. But what this will do is it'll show you in areas where there's much more development going on, which would show up in the next route as well. So you can see it right here, an FL60, that means 6,000 feet. This is what it looks like at 9,000 feet. And at 12,000, you wouldn't even see any. So you can see that this is pretty low echo tops in this area. But one thing you can do is, and by the way, the only time you would hit the weather button is if you want to change some of your customized settings. So we go in here, and you can set your maximum altitude, because obviously you're not really interested what the weather is above the altitude of which you can fly over anyway. So you can customize that. By the way, this has a little weather key. It'll give you information on certain weather pages, such as the next rad. And then, of course, your temperature is Fahrenheit and Celsius. But seriously, who would use Celsius? Just hit the enter button again. And these are the winds aloft. Okay. Let's just go to more of a blank page again here. We don't really want to see any navigational information on the screen when we're just looking at the winds only. And there are different color arrows, and you can tell exactly what the speed is in knots. And this is at 9,000 feet. But what we do is you take, it'll take the altitude you're closest to right now. That's the mode it's in. We're at 10,000 feet, so it pulls the winds up at. You go back in here, that's another setting you can change. You can change it from the auto setting to, you can have it cycle through all the different altitudes
obviously up until your maximum altitude that you set. Or you can just manually say, I just want to see what it is at 6,000 right now. That's another example. Just tap at the top here, close that menu out. Another thing to remember is this WX key, or your weather key, really is for only changing customized settings of how you view the weather. It is also allows you to customize which types of weather information you see on the screen if you want to set up customized layers. But most people don't use that. They really just hit the enter button. Every time you hit the enter button, you'll get a different layer of weather on the screen. And last thing in here is your XM diagnostics, and this will communicate directly with the weather receiver and just verify that everything's working correctly. And if it is not, it will tell you what's going wrong and what you need to do to get it to work. Just hit return to true map to go back to the main screen. So really, you don't hit that weather button when you're in flight. You're just hitting the enter button for different layers of weather information. And of course, you're hitting the arrow key next to it to display different layers of navigational information. And left and right up here to change your range in and out. There's one thing that you get through your XM weather feed that is actually navigational data, and that is, of course, temporary flight restrictions. You'll notice them because there'll be airspace that's yellow and red alternating like this. Of course, if you tap on it, it'll give you the detailed information of what that airspace is. When you receive your Cheetah Flight Pad, as part of all the defaults on every navigational screen, the TFRs are automatically included. But it is actually a layer that you can go into and customize it if you want to. So maybe you want to take it off one of the layers. In this case, you can see it's just right there, it's TFR. You still need to get a pre-flight weather briefing, of course, and get the latest information on TFRs. But these do get updated about every 12 minutes in flight. Although we have separate software called True Winds, which gathers the highly accurate rapid update cycle winds on the ground to compute the most fuel efficient and or fastest flight level during your trip. You might want to check during the flight to see if anything has changed. As long as you have XM weather, all you would do is hit the WX key. You see we've got a little right arrow here. Winds, we hit that. And this is based on the performance of your plane. What it's telling us is right now, which we're basically at about 2,000 feet, our estimated time is going to be 2 hours and 3 minutes. And we are going to burn 57.4 gallons. What this shows you is at different altitudes how that's going to change. So if we were to go up to 3,000 feet, we would actually save 4 minutes, and we would save a lot of fuel. We would save actually 7 gallons in this particular situation. If you go up further, let's say we go looking for the least amount of fuel, you would see at 9,000 feet is the best altitude to go for the most fuel efficient flight. Now it's going to add 7 minutes to our trip, but that's a small price to pay for all the fuel we're saving. So basically, if you see the time in red, that means it's adding to your estimated time with winds down here. If you see it in green, that means you can subtract it off your estimated time down here. Just tap in the upper left-hand corner to remove that menu. Let's say you have the XRX traffic alert. If you have that plugged in, it's going to show you traffic in a number of different ways. One way is it's going to show it to you up here. And what it's saying is 0.8 miles away, there's traffic 600 feet below you. Of course, you can see a lot more detailed information of the traffic as well. You actually hit the message key for traffic messages and tap on the traffic arrow. And in this case, you can place it in the corner. And we can see that traffic right here in front of us. You do also have the option where you can have a full screen display of it, or you can have it in alert mode. And what alert mode means is it'll only pop up in the corner of the screen when there's traffic within 6 miles and 600 feet either side of you. So sort of that protective bubble around you, it'll pop up. And as soon as the traffic leaves that area, it's going to go away if you have it in the alert mode. Some people want to have it on all the time. For instance, in this case here, we've got traffic. It's 400 feet above you, 300 feet above you actually, and it's descending right now. See, it's down to 200 feet.